out of the gate, you're going to be on deck for number 3.
You got number 3? You got one? Okay.
Yes.
It's a draft. There you go. A draft of the professional services agreement.
She's ready.
Right on. I have no doubt. I was just giving a heads up so I didn't call on any deers in headlights.
We are live now and ready to go.
Right on. Cool. All right. Rollingwood Community Development Corporation roll call. If we could start with Ms. Miller, please.
Sure. Susan Miller.
David Smith.
Barry Del-Cambry.
Mike Dyson.
Josh McKay.
Becky Kittleman.
Pat Sheehan.
Megan Santee.
Right on. We have citizen comments. No? Okay. So no public comments. We'll move the consent agenda. The only item on here is approval of the minutes. Get a motion for the consent agenda.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Fantastic. Thank you. Discussion and possible action on an agreement for professional services by and between the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation and the City of Rollingwood. Just in case anyone doesn't recall, we took action at our last meeting, or potentially the meeting before, to engage our EDC council to draft this agreement, which is required by statute between the city and its EDC. And we have now been presented with our first copy of the draft. And at that, I will let Megan give any bit of background that you might have. Did you work on this specifically, or was this Charlie's baby?
I believe it was Charlie's baby.
Charlie's baby.
And then Abel and Ashley and I worked together to come up with a number
Okay.
for the contract.
Yep. And I see that that's at 88,000.
Correct.
And did you guys have, I'm assuming, all the backup to show that number?
Right.
Because that was our ask, right, last time I remember.
Correct.
Specifically.
Yeah.
We didn't put it in the backup.
But you guys have it
We have
internally,
it.
so we can take a look at
Right. Basically, office rents, we charged market price.
Okay.
And basically, of all of this, we took 20%, thinking that 20% is about what we probably spend on RCDC. So 20% of office rent, utilities, salary for Abel,
Okay.
myself, and Ashley, website, software, and hardware, 20% of the audit, and then 20% of property and liability insurance. And so the total of that was actually a little north of $103,000.
Okay.
And so we didn't want to put that in, so we just put in the 88 that
Okay.
RCDC is
Which is
used to.
I think is probably right, because if I was going through this, I might question about 20% of use of all of those things. So
Right.
I think 88 maybe sounds a little bit more
Sure.
in line. I trust that if any of us need to delve into it any deeper, that easy conversation to have with you and Abel.
Absolutely.
So when you say 20% though, that's 20% of city expenditures, or where did the 20%, what 20% are you referencing out of 100? Sorry.
So we kind of thought between the 5 boards and commissions, 20%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even number, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess it would also be good for us to know that this is a kind of a first pass at making sure that we get this right. The ask came at us at 88,000, right? And we approved expenditures out of our budget at 88,000. What I will expect us to do is to keep track of those actual expenses through the year, so that as next budget year rolls around, we can make sure that if there is any need to tighten up what that actual number is, we can get a better idea of, rather than kind of a very educated guess at this point, right? Is that
Sure.
a fair way to look at
Yeah.
this?
Mm-hmm.
You guys think that that's an okay way to look at this? Megan, I see this grin. Am I saying something wrong?
No,
Or
it's good.
We're good? Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. At that point, if you have any other
Nothing.
details, anybody up here have any thoughts or questions on it?
I just have one question. So the agreement starts in January and ends in September, which is the fiscal year end. But is that amount prorated for 12 months or is that a 9-month amount?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's a 12-month amount.
Huh.
I just plugged in January 1 because of the timing where it's finally coming to you all, and then it'll be approved by council at the December 18th meeting.
Okay.
So, but then going forward, I would imagine it would be an October 1 through September 30th agreement.
Okay, so we're gonna retroactively,
52,000.
okay, so if you prorate the 88,000, it's at 52,000, but I'm assuming that we've already gobbled up
Yeah,
some of,
we've used some of it for 3
we've
months.
used some of
So
this.
we should do it effectively for the whole year.
That's right. Is,
I mean-
is that the right way to look at it, the way you and Abel were talking about it? So we should prorate it despite the fact that it technically starts on the first, we still owe
88.
88.
I didn't intend to prorate it, and maybe Megan might have, is that date okay, or should we put in?
The start of our
the intent
our fiscal
to-
year.
If you want it to run with the budget, I was gonna say that, I think then that was a conversation last time.
I think it, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it probably should run with the budget, as what we're trying to satisfy here is that the city is not allowed to provide anything to the EDC of value without the EDC reimbursing, right? So what we can't do is have 3 months worth of value provided for the city without us reimbursing.
So I just don't know if there's a change to the language, if there's an
Yeah.
amendment for that, or just
So perhaps because,
however legally it has to work, so it's communicated that that's for
You
the
could have it
whole
effective
fiscal year.
October 1st, signed that today.
yeah, executed,
Yeah.
and, yeah, I think that's a great point, thank you. If you guys wouldn't mind, you and Charlie,
Yeah.
put your heads together and make sure that that's the right way to tackle it.
And if we need to have any modified language within that sentence, we can add that.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, do we have any other, man, good luck, anybody else that wants to try to follow that? Excellent point, anybody else have thoughts or comments? Well, in that case, I will move to, just rock it out. I'll move to, I guess, we're accepting the agreement or sending the agreement for approval of city council at this point,
You're approving it for the, yes.
for the
board
RCDC
is-
standpoint. Got it.
And sending it on to council for consideration and action.
Perfect. All right, well, at this point, I'll move to accept the professional services agreement by and between the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation, the City of Rollingwood, as presented with the one previously noted change to the potential change to the effective date, subject to council's review, and to send the draft over to city council for approval by the city.
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion, guys? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Are you gonna actually physically change your hat when you sign this?
We do
No.
have elections coming up.
We have a,
That's on, I see what you're saying. Wait, do I get to sign both?
yes,
Yeah, you
I
do.
noticed
That's-
that, last time we had to do that, someone else signed for you.
Well, yeah,
Vice
we'll definitely
President.
wanna do that. Yeah, that's a really good note to make as well.
Elections are coming up, so,
At the end of this,
right.
you're anticipating a no vote confidence in my leadership.
No, I'm not, but I was anticipating you wanting to roll off.
No comment. Yeah. Okay, item 4, discussion and possible action on the direction to staff regarding the retail coach report and posting to the website. Guys, if you all remember that Aaron Farmer was in here on behalf of retail coach, our last meeting, gave a pretty good bit of background on the report that we had commissioned through them. The question that's before us now is, what are our first steps of taking some action on that report? And in that regard, I started taking a look at kind of neighboring jurisdictions, EDCs, that had undergone similar studies and how they provided that information to the public. What I thought was one of the better presentations was through Cibolo, Cibolo's EDC, and I guess we're getting that pull up. Thank you. I'm trying to think. If you scroll down a little bit, there you go. Data and demographics.
Okay.
So what they've done is quite literally taken the information and made it available to anybody that's considering doing business in Cibolo or maybe already doing business in Cibolo. I would suggest that this is a perfect way for us to at least get started, put it out into the public so that they can use the data in any way that they think is best for them. And then as we start, as a community, start really understanding and digging through it, we may have some actionable plans as well. I hope we do. So,
I missed the last meeting and didn't have an opportunity to interact with them directly, but one of the questions I had when they were first deciding if we were gonna hire them to do the study, just to offer or understand what we can offer as a community in terms of incentives for businesses to come into the community.
Yep.
So I don't know if that was ever taken into account in their study, but certainly that would be something we would wanna.
so that's right. That's the next. And if you wouldn't mind, Amber, could I trouble you to click on the incentives tab? I just really like the way they've done this website. It's pretty intuitive. And, yeah. So if you'll notice,
Boston.
right, it's not necessarily specific, and my guess is the way Cibolo is tackling this right now, and perhaps if this broadcast makes it to them, they'll lend some additional information. But my guess is the way they're working through this now is to kind of on a case-by-case basis with folks that are interested in doing business or are currently doing business in their community. Considering that Rollingwood size and thereby a level of limitation on opportunities, traditional build-out opportunities, I suppose, I would kind of recommend maybe taking a kind of a broad brush stroke or approach to talking about incentives. And it's really going to be largely in the purview of, I would assume, in our city council's purview,
So-
large part of public discussion.
What does that mean though? Cause I feel like when you just have something so broad, it's not engaging or enticing.
Sure.
And at least in the background, if we can understand what we can work within, then we can, I don't know they need to put it on the website, but
Sure.
at least we know, and given kind of how things work and get approved,
Yeah.
opportunities will be missed unless we know what we can act on. So I guess just legally,
have a question. What has the city of Westlake done? Because they're our neighbors and.
Excellent question. I didn't see where they had necessarily presented this type of information to the
So,
public, so I don't know that they.
Commercial realtor's gonna come here and they're gonna wanna answer that we've got these something that they can, some information for them that they need.
Mhm.
So either commercial realtors need to have this information. Do they come to the city of Rollingwood for
So
this
they
information?
can contact either the city directly, and if they were to contact the city, it would be most likely Amber or Ashley that would take the call.
Do y'all have any commercial realtors that call, ask questions about properties?
Realtors?
I mean, who else?
Brokers.
Investors.
Well,
So
I think
developers.
It's developers
And business owners, sort of.
right, so, for example, one of my clients has been talking about how Pflugerville, the mayor of Pflugerville has been hounding them to come to their community. So, I guess, first we have to understand what retail is actually available and figure out a better way to communicate that
Which
to
is in our report.
people outside
Yep.
of the community. And then second, when we message the opportunity, we can
Needs to
keep
be
it
clear.
broad and case by case, but we also need to be able to have in our back pocket what we can offer to at least get the conversation rolling, because otherwise I feel like
You know,
we're
I
just
think the
kind of
best
waiting
people to ask would be the retail coach, because this is what they do.
True.
Agree.
That's
So
true.
like what other communities are doing, and
Yeah.
whether it's Buda and the economic boom that we've seen there, Pflugerville, et cetera, just what we can.
I mean, that was one of the things he offered, was to continue, he wanted to stay on the bankroll for this reason.
And to your point, I've had continued conversations with both Aaron Farmer at Retail Coach and with businesses actually that are most of those businesses actually will reach out to some citizen maybe that they know in the community who inevitably has funneled them my direction, right? And then part of my role, not only here on RCDC, but also as the mayor, is to, let me tell you about all the great things, be basically a head cheerleader for our community kind of thing, and start the conversation. So that role has happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes the community doesn't like the conversation that manifests from that, and other times, hopefully, the conversation's a little bit better received. But I would agree with you. It's a large part, and to your point, with the mayor, doing in Pflugerville, hounding folks to come in and do business there. Yeah, I mean I would hope that's kind of all of our roles, right? So when we're talking to folks that
Yeah, so when I say
businesses.
that, because I work with restaurants, so I say
Yeah.
that all the time, I want more people here the better.
Sure.
But I don't know if I can say, well, we can offer X, Y, and Z. So it's just what makes it more economically compelling for them to come here versus somewhere else.
Sure, and the way I've approached that conversation is we can talk about these types of things and to figure out what best fits for your business and our community. And then the idea being, it doesn't do us any good to lure a business to our community that isn't going to thrive in our community. And I mean, it's a type thing at the end of the day, right? So in my mind, it's more of soliciting a conversation rather than, and starting that conversation. We have a really small community here. It's fairly easy for us to talk.
I don't know, and I should, because I sit on this board, but I don't know what those compelling points are.
Like, can we
Sure.
do
Like
it?
a-
Like,
like a
what would,
checklist,
what
like-
would, I see what you're saying. I think I
Like-
see what you're saying. What can we even have a conversation
Like
about?
if
Oh, no,
there's
it's
a tax abatement
We need
opportunity, what
like
does that
we
mean?
need a talking point.
You need to know the tools in the
I
toolbox.
see what you're saying.
We need a PR,
Yeah, I get it.
so we're all messaging the same thing.
One other thing I thought was intriguing that he talked about were these buildings that have been here for years, the mom and pop buildings, that if somebody came to him and said, I would like to buy your building, it's kinda like all these houses that are being torn down here. They might not just say, I wanna put it on the market, but if somebody calls them and says, hey, would you sell your home, then they're like, okay, they don't even think about.
That's right.
So there's a lot of property, evidently there's some properties like that.
So he's actually one of the best things about having a retained retail coach, above any number of other businesses that provide a similar function, is that Aaron specifically, he runs or is current president of the EDC in Dripping Springs, and it is just a world that he lives in, right? So most of the folks that own up and down our commercial corridor, he either knows them or knows someone who does know them. So in just having those conversations and being able to really invite those conversations into the city has proven, I would argue, worth the effort. Now, the trick again is converting that into something actionable,
It happens.
right? And that's the juncture at which we find ourselves now. We should. This is the first conversation on, now that we have this data, what do we do with it? And what can we do meaningfully with it? And I would agree with you that it's turn to the expert that got us here. Now that this has been delivered, what do you generally see? Like, not just, hey, I can have this conversation, great. What does this conversation mean? How are we going to have it? At what point does, whatever, a property owner come to the city, whether in front of us or in whatever other capacity, and have a discussion about, guys, if your ordinances were in this way or allowed this type of business, we would do X, Y, and Z with this property. Is that something that makes sense to the community, right? Because it would make sense from a retail perspective, right?
One of the things they talked about, there was like a few barriers that we had, right? The first one was the zoning, and looking at the planning and zoning commission's like agenda, I don't know where that sits on their side. That's like, seems to me like our biggest.
I can offer a little bit of upside there, but yeah, go ahead, please.
And then, that's the first one, right? So that makes, like, we're kind of open for business. We've had like more modern like zoning laws, and then like I think something like this is like, back to Susan's point, like, do we present this to the city council, or it's like how do we understand what we can offer? Like, we have some money, right? Can that be part of this? How does that work?
So technically, the city
Yeah.
has to offer these items, right? Just to understand
It
where
needs to be a group, yeah.
that's right, where we are an advertising agency without being an advertising agency.
Yeah.
But our job, I don't want anybody to think that we're spending all of our money
No,
appropriately on
no.
advertising.
Right, but so in that case, would we, just to speed this up a little, would we recommend, like, we would like the city, or like the council to, investigate having the ability to have tax abatements, grant loans, incentives, like those types of things? Is that what we should do?
What say you, Council Member Patillo? Do you think
Like,
that is?
should we drive it, or wait for city council to drive it? I feel like we should drive it.
I would say you have the language already,
Mhm.
make
Okay.
make a motion to send it to the council to review it.
To consider this?
Yeah.
Go, we literally
So I don't
Do
have
it.
the language, I'm still not quite sure what we can offer, but I think we should drive this in something similar to this, and then.
Okay.
Well, we need our retail coach.
Retail coach
Right.
needs to provide.
Like,
Yeah,
we need
our
some
retail coach
guidance.
needs to provide the language.
So I think maybe that's, and I don't know that we need to take specific action for that, but what we can do,
Well, I think that
Amber
we
and
need to,
Ashley, if
like,
you could maybe help get this on our calendar, get a conversation back with Aaron.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, these options are pretty much all the options available to every municipality in Texas.
That's right.
These
That's
are
why I say
all-
this
Yes.
is.
All the tools that you
Yeah.
have in your toolbox are listed there, so it would not be much different from what you would list. Now, like municipal grants and loans, you would need to, if you wanted to set something up, you would need to establish a program.
Mhm.
But notice that it says, like building permit fee waivers. So you would establish a program, an application process, how you selected that kind of thing, or the winner of some of those things, but it's all gonna look the same. And I would also would also work closely with a financial advisor for any, they can help you with tax abatement and tax phase-in
And a TIF.
and a tip. And basically, tax abatement would be just a share in the property taxes or a share in the sales taxes if they locate it for a certain amount of time, and then if they meet a certain
Volume.
standard, yeah, that you would establish. And then TIF is basically the delta of the value that they add to your property values that you would pay, they would
Good
earn
rebate.
that,
Good
yeah,
rebate.
for a certain time. So it really is up to, you know, it's case by case basis.
So one of the things that I remember asking them when they first came in was helping us identify the pain points for business owners and developers. So number one enemy is permitting. So understanding what we have within our power with respect to fast tracking and timing, and then promoting what our permitting process could be as a community relative to the others around us, because City of Austin is a total nightmare. So if we can say, for example, it will take you 2 years to build your restaurant in the City of Austin, but Rollingwood can do it in at X cost.
And you will have a live person to work with.
Mm-hmm.
and
Right, so
they're
just,
in the
so
process,
coming,
yeah.
like figuring out those pain points and that we can control and offer a better solution, and then promoting it.
I agree
Is
that
that-
we should come up
Speak
with
their language.
So
a
can
quick list that we could all have.
Is that something
everyone in
that
the
has to
city
be done
has
within
access to
the council formats, or can this be in like a working session, or like us
So-
drafting out? Like
To answer that question, you hit exactly what I was gonna suggest, is maybe a kind of a cross-disciplinary subcommittee, right, where a couple members of RCDC, we get together with a couple members of planning and zoning at the very least, right? And then perhaps have the input of city staff as well.
I think that's a great idea, and especially since the first access it seems like that developers are having is through planning and zoning. Because as this redevelopment is changing over, they're looking at our zoning codes and they're like, well, we wanna locate this business here, but it doesn't really fit. And so
Right.
planning and zoning
think
is
we have a
going to be
joint meeting.
considering either
We could do that
ordinance
as well,
changes
just so we're on
or
the same page.
allowing these uses kind of without the knowledge of RCDC and this retail coach knowledge. It's important, I think, to have a committee like that, so
Yeah.
that way they have all the same information you do and know how important it is.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well, we all need to
no
be
one gets
speaking the
one
same
shot at
language.
this.
And so, planning and zoning is actually in the very early stages of tackling, well, I guess a full look at our zoning scheme
Correct.
across the city,
Yes.
right? To figure out what is maybe antiquated, what maybe doesn't make sense. So I think it's a critical, again, we're at a critical juncture where RCDC, our role should be to talk with them in terms of exactly, well, what retail coach
And
provided in our
I think we
thoughts.
need to be cognizant of all these incentives, but I think that is to a degree on down the road, because I think, and Amber, you pointed this out, I think there's some root issues with regard to taking a holistic look that hasn't been taken in a long time about zoning and master planning, because right now I'm using the restaurant example. If I'm a restaurant and, someone from Rollingwood or city council will say, hey, you should think about moving to Rollingwood, I'm gonna go, where? I mean, we're in unlike, Cibolo, unlike Dripping Springs that has, empty spots to go build a, Chick-fil-A or, whatever,
Yeah.
Dave's Chicken King. We don't really have that. And so part of it all is if we take a look at it through the master planning, through the zoning process, then, because I think part of the key is going to be having existing property owners, non-residential property owners, take a look and understand kind of what they have, and then also looking back at developers, having developers see potential opportunities, and through, doing some zoning changes, hopefully break down barriers for, new owners or developers wanna come in here and redevelop things and not have to go through a entire zoning change.
Yeah, it's already done.
So,
What about the new development that's on the corner of Rollingwood and BK's, Alma?
mhm.
I mean, he would probably be a really good source, cause he's been through this, and this is a totally new building,
Yeah.
so he would be a really good source for us to talk to. And I would imagine that people that come, that's gonna
He's
bring
on
a lot
P&Z.
of new commercial development, I mean,
yeah, so,
renters into the
Yeah, except
area.
yeah, one of the
they
principals
executed
is a resident here,
Another
Jamil,
pub.
and
Yeah.
he's on our P and Z.
He is on the
Yeah,
P&Z.
and that was one of the catalysts, because, I mean, that's not his project, he's a partner at the company, but, one of the catalysts was to help understand the zoning process or the
That's-
planning process.
That's just like one step, and that's just gonna bring a whole new wave of
Right.
interest in.
Yeah, and so what we do have, I'm not sure how
Jamal, he's moving across the
uh,
street from me. and that's
how
fine.
deep into
That building with the church, they sold
the
the church,
information
that
that
property.
retail coaches
Park Hill
provided,
sold.
everyone's had an opportunity to get,
Mhm.
but
Right there
a
on
large
the
part of what they
Huge
discuss
project.
in there
It's going
is
By the-
maybe the concept of right zoning,
Oh, okay.
right? And
on the right.
to
Right
that
behind the church,
point,
Park
there
Hill
is a
Church.
tremendous amount of
I didn't
information
know that.
that the existing owners
Huge building.
can have at their fingertips now on
Back to the-
what they
yeah,
might
yeah.
consider going forward to optimize their investments, right? And then the conversation, the way I see that conversation happening, they see an opportunity to optimize their investment. They come to the city and say, guys, this is what's in our heads.
Right.
How does that fit with the
I didn't know
community and how does the community feel about it? And I think the right stop there would be RCDC, and then probably it jumps over to P and Z, and those recommendations and thoughts make their way up to council for a decision. at some
I just
point.
don't want us to lose momentum. We got this, right? This is already like a month and a half old. City planning and zoning is like just now, as you said, starting to look at it. So we're talking like, I mean, that's like, sounds to me like a year. So like, we gotta start, I mean, not really, but it's just gonna take time, right? We're city councils, and so things don't move fast. So but we're also small, so
Let's
we
see,
should be able to move
Sure,
quicker.
I agree with
So
that.
That's all I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and I would agree wholeheartedly with you, with your idea of not losing momentum. Certainly, we don't want anything jumping on a shelf and collecting any dust. So the question, I guess, in front of us now is, what do you guys want to do next? My recommendation is really start, first order of business is to get,
Listen to our retail coach.
a call with Aaron. As I said, I've had a couple conversations with him. You know what would be really helpful is if maybe we provide specific questions as you go through the information. If we could ask maybe Ashley to take those very specific thoughts and comments so that we can start working through them systematically. And then we can
Email.
present, email, please. Then we can take that to Aaron, and Aaron can start addressing those in a thoughtful manner. The next order of business I would recommend is for us to reach out to planning and zoning and seeing about establishing some kind of subcommittee so that we can have both groups can have a good understanding of what see as two different hands, right? The other hand is thinking, so to speak.
Can we call the first meeting the full commissions together and then break it up? Make sure we're all,
I think that would
On the
be
same
good.
page.
The only caveat I'm gonna say with the subcommittee is that I know the city council has had some levels of consideration on how subcommittees are formed. I'm not sure if they've made any definitive or taken any definitive action in that.
Can we have a meeting with planning and zoning and retail coach and us all together, the whole
So,
groups?
Yeah, I suspect there could easily be a public, I mean, we'd have to,
Planning and zoning meeting on Monday the 9th. If y'all are gonna attend, we can add a retail coach item to that agenda and have retail coach present.
okay, we could be there as individuals
Right.
and, okay. And then we could actually engage in the agenda item as citizens or even as, could we engage as directors?
You just need to post it as a notice of possible quorum.
Okay.
We would do that.
Okay.
All right, so does that make a level of sense for folks that have a Monday night open?
Yeah, because I think one of the things we're gonna lay out that I'm a little unclear on is how do you get from looking at the retail coach data, process-wise, from the retail coach data to actually effectuating, master planning zoning change?
Sure.
What's that gonna look like?
They have some very specific, they've
Yeah.
provided some very specific suggestions.
Right.
And I think as a community, it's kind of up to us as to what we decide is, in our community's best interest at this time. And I don't know that this specific commission or board rather can make that decision unilaterally. I'm sure we can,
Yeah.
actually. But I certainly think that we should be a driving force of that conversation.
Because part of my worry is unless, there's some, vision, unless there's some process kind of laid out, this thing has potential to kind of
Fizzle.
amble along,
Yeah. Yeah.
meander.
What are the implications and long-standing effects of changing zoning? So how does that process work?
The actual changing of the zoning, you wanna, yeah, it gets kind of technical. Very technical.
Is that included within the retail coach report?
Yes.
Okay.
They recommended.
Yeah,
so
they actually recommend changes.
Go ahead and do it ahead of time rather than
Yeah.
wait on it.
Megan, maybe I'll tell them through the process, but I'm not that familiar if it's a city initiated zoning change. Maybe it's the same exact process. Basically, local city ordinance says we have to notify every property owner for any zoning change that is performed in basically our commercial corridor. And so they have to have no less than 30 days written notice that goes out in the mail. We also publish in the paper, and we hold a public hearing at the planning and zoning meeting. They make a recommendation to the council. The council holds a public meeting, and then they make the final determination.
I was gonna try to pull up your ordinances. I think that sounds correct, but there might be, I think there might be an option for those who wanna opt out to be grandfathered in until such time as the property sells or changes hands.
Changes hands.
Yeah.
So then, I guess my next question is regarding the areas that are better used under a different zone than their current. Has there been any socialization with those business owners on the potential change? And if so, what is their reaction then?
Not yet. Not yet, but that's,
I think you put the report on the internet and publicize it a little bit.
That's right.
The owners of those buildings are gonna be looking at, or the land, are gonna be
Yeah.
looking at, and they're gonna see that the recommendation is to upzone
yeah,
stuff that, like the hospital.
sure. And I'm just gonna say that we're not necessarily talking upzoning,
Well,
optimizing. But I understand,
Yeah.
certainly understand where you're coming. So, to that end also, we've had conversations with both the Picayune and Community Impact, and both publications understand the importance of this information when it was presented, and reached out to the community and to me personally as well as to Amber, and I'm sure other members of the city council why it matters to the community. So the story will be out there, and then I think the combination of getting that story out there, continuing on with the conversation as to why it's important, and then on top of that, making the data available. Ideally, making the data available before the stories come out there, so that when people go looking for it, they can find it. And we could sit here all day long and pontificate on all different ways that we should use this, but I can assure you, once you put it out in the public sphere, any number of folks will come up with usages that will never ever cross our minds. And perhaps a bit of a Pandora's box, but at the end of the day, it's important for us as a community to realize why this is important. 20% of our revenues, of our city revenues, come in the form of sales tax. 80% come in the form of ad valorem property taxes. To put it in perspective for you, our neighbors in Westlake Hills, 70% sales tax, 30% property taxes, right? So I don't know that we could ever flip that much. But what I can tell you is that even the S&P has suggested that that is not an ideal balance. I will hesitate to say that they suggested it was potentially unhealthy. But what it does is give us a lot of room to do better, right?
Yeah.
And just in case anybody doesn't understand why that's critically important, the burden of those property taxes is felt by our residents, right? And our business owners. Our business owners that own the property, that are trying to bring in, we're a community of small businesses, right? We are not a big box type community. Those smaller businesses typically by their very nature have smaller budgets, smaller margins. What they cannot get hit with is massive rates to lease a space and then still expect to thrive in our community. So we've got to figure out a way to help alleviate some of that burden, and the best way to do that is to start shifting the scales and get our sales tax up, help our businesses thrive, and ultimately that'll help our community thrive even more than we do today. So that's the big picture that we're trying to get through here. That's why we're here. That's why we commissioned this. This provides data points for planning and zoning to sit back and say, this is why we're undertaking these actions, so that when the notes go out to the public, which are required by ordinance, the conversation, I guarantee you, will happen in a public forum. I can't imagine that it wouldn't in our community. And at that point, we have real data points that we can feed back to the community and help everybody understand the way the world seems to be shaped on this side, and then we can have an intelligent and educated conversation on how we go forward. So, big picture wise, that's what we're trying to accomplish down this road. I'm trying to make sure we're staying well within the discussion of retail coach. I don't know what action, if any, aside from some direction that I think we're all pretty clear on at this point. Does anybody have? Our task from this is to review the information, review it again, and then be thoughtful on what questions Retail Coach can help answer for us. Send those over to Ashley, and Ashley can put those together and distribute back to the board so that we all are on the same page with the questions, and we'll get them in front of Aaron for some response. The other item, Amber, let's you and I get with Jordan and see about how best to get all of our groups together, and we'll start by meeting at P&Z's meeting, I suppose, or being in attendance.
For when our questions should be due?
Probably a pretty good idea. Yeah. What do you guys? I know everyone's very, very busy at the end of the day. Can we suggest is a week?
I mean, December 12th, can we do that? Because we were going to have a meeting, and I'm assuming that we may not.
I will be the first to tell you, I will be out that day. So if you
Well, it's
guys,
just a submission
if we have
of
a
questions,
meeting, I
right?
will be there. What's that?
Oh, sorry, yeah. I was just
Yeah,
saying it's a submission of questions. If that's our deadline, that's 7 days away, right?
Yeah, it's 7 days away, enough time to review the data, think about it, review it again, and think about it and
Yep.
formulate the questions.
Yep.
Everyone feel good about that? Great. So let's set the deliverable to Ashley by the 12th. Ashley, if you don't have it by the 12th, assume we don't have questions or we didn't do our homework.
I'll send the email in the morning with all that info on it too.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great. Any other discussion on this item? Thank you all very much. It was a great discussion. Discussion on member terms, term expirations, and intent to continue serving. The city has an ordinance that technically you're terminated at six consecutive years of service on a board, or you're up for resignation at that point, unless the city council extends your term. We have one director who I would argue is a critical component of this board. Pat, it is my sincere hope, you've indicated that you're willing to stick this out. I am going to be the first to advocate to the city council that Pat Sheehan's service be extended. There you go. Okay, so I'll call it number 6 too to make sure we're on the same page. Discussion and possible action on a recommendation to city council to grant a term limit extension for Pat Sheehan to continue serving on RCDC. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll make a
You
motion.
move to recommend
Yes.
to city council?
Yes.
Perfect.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Fantastic. Pat, thanks for the continued willingness to serve.
Yeah.
7, nomination and election of president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer of the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation for the 2020 calendar year. Ordinance requires us to elect these positions annually in December. And we are in December, so here we are.
But didn't we just do this?
We did. We missed. Well, no, it's a really good point. We did just do this. We missed as an RCDC. We missed the time to do this last year.
Okay, got it.
And it was brought to our attention. So you're right. We have held these respective positions for less than the typical year. That said, one of the things that we are doing is making sure we are getting our board on process. So
I got it.
here we are today. God, how do you guys want to go about this? Who wants to raise your hand?
I'll continue to be treasurer.
Can we just keep it as is,
Would you like the same?
across the board?
I mean, if that's the motion, you can, absolutely. One thing that I would like to indicate, I love serving on this board. I think we're doing great work, and there's phenomenal people here. It has been
Yeah.
no,
Just get it out.
no, it has been. Here's the thing. I'd be honored to continue serving in this capacity. It has been expressed that there is an optics concern with me being both the mayor and president of our EDC. I think that I can successfully wear hats and discern properly, but I certainly understand where that could cause some pause and potentially consternation. So in the spirit of that, I am beyond willing to suggest that maybe somebody else don the yoke or the crown, depending on.
So still serve, just no longer as president, is that correct?
I'd be honored to continue in the work, but maybe it's better for somebody else to have to work through an agenda.
But there's also a benefit of the coordination. We're dealing with one person both places. He knows what's going on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
I think that adds
Really got a lot of
value.
hands here. I don't know if you noticed.
Well, tried. Again, I'm honored to serve in this capacity. I know we're doing a lot of good work here. There are definitely a few things that I think are critical for us to to continue to accomplish and work through. So I'm happy to spearhead that if you guys think it's the right fit. Yeah,
I'll
and
make a
again,
motion that we leave it as it is.
So quite honestly, I feel we're at like a juncture of, like Amber said earlier, of where, and optics aside, of where we're at a point where we're either gonna do, this is gonna go really well, or it's like we're not gonna do anything and we're gonna be a binder. So, I mean, I don't know what your like work-life balance is with everything else, but I feel like it's pretty critical to keep you at the helm for right now.
Yeah, I do too.
For the reason that Pat said, and for just the coordination and the understanding of both the city side and RCDC side, it would be tough to lose you at this point.
I'm gonna open up for public comment. Any opposition?
And I like
this
that-
normally only happens when you're out of town and you come back and you realize, oh Jesus, shouldn't have left.
I mean, I'll echo as a new member. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, I feel like there are things that we're doing as a group to get our house in order as a group, but also kind of modernize and be forward thinking. And I think because of your role and your understanding on council and here, I think there is a good vision, and I think we're going to need that in the near term to kind of get us through the next year and kind of transform this group to operate and to optimize the operation of this group. And it's a one-year term, one-year commitment.
Next year, you're free to leave.
But not, well,
Next year, you're
well,
free to become a member.
I'll tell you what, if the sentiment is to kind of keep the hats where they are, you know, at the end of the day, what's in a title really doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of difference, other than you better start delivering on whatever that very specific item is. I want us to make sure that we do have a lot of new faces, right? I want us to make sure, I would just ask a level of personal commitment to, as you guys, you know, spend a little more time and understand kind of what this EDC is about and what it should be about. Just gonna be a level of mentorship so that come next December,
Yep.
Okay.
somebody else is ready. Okay.
Understood.
But I think part of it also, I mean, I think it says something that we have everyone present in December.
Agreed. Well, that's because we've got a awesome board, and I don't say it lightly. Honored to serve with you guys.
I'll make a motion that we nominate the existing officers for one more year of term.
I second it.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Put the caveat.
We'll do something.
Congratulations.
Thanks, guys. No, seriously, thanks, guys. A discussion on the RCDC financials as of October 31st, 2019.
So there's only been 1 month of recorded financials, and it looks like we brought in $12,000 of sales tax revenue in October and spent nothing. I don't know if there was any further discussion with the park commission or where that was left off.
We haven't received, we have not received any communication or request from the Park Commission.
So do they fall off a cliff?
I did ask,
No?
for how much money that
I think
they've turned away.
I think the Park Commission is potentially regrouping. I know at least one of their commissioners, well, Sandra, resigned, and for very just unfortunate reasons, and I appreciate everything that she's done and completely understand why. But I think what the park commission is looking at right now is trying to, they also have a lot of new folks,
Yeah.
and I think maybe initially there was an underestimation of the work that needed to be, tackled, and I think they have a very good idea of that now, and they're making a very methodical approach to getting that done. I have no doubt that the good work that they're doing will culminate in a request to city council at some point, but at present we don't have anything. Any questions on, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that's it.
Any questions on the financials? Discussion possible action on canceling the December 12th, 2019 RCDC meeting. So, as Barry pointed out earlier, obviously that's next week. I don't know how much business we would get conducted in a week to really make that a worthwhile meeting. Perhaps we cancel next week and hold our next regular scheduled meeting in January. With the only issue being, I would request, I know it's a big travel holiday, but in spirit of making sure that we don't lose momentum, if something is to materialize with our meeting with planning and zoning, I would just hope, I'm sure you guys are fantastic, we'll have an opportunity to maybe, if we need to, for momentum, have a special call meeting.
Can that be done by conference call too, or no?
I don't know the answer to that. Have we ever really looked into that? As I know, there are special considerations for city council. Does that exist for RCDC as well?
I need to double check the Open Meetings Act to see if it's just any governing body or if it's, but RCDC is not a governing body, so.
Yeah.
But you must comply with the Open Meetings Act, so let me double check that and see.
Yeah, that might be pretty helpful, and whether it's, a Skype with video might make a difference than maybe just a voice call. But it seems in this day and age, if we can't take advantage of some of the technology that's out there, what the heck is it for?
FaceTime.
Although, I would ask that we don't use that as an excuse to dial into all of our meetings.
No.
Okay. All right.
It's too far to walk.
So when is the next meeting?
It would be January,
9th, I think.
the next regular scheduled meeting.
The 9th.
No.
Okay.
So going back to school then?
Yep.
So we need a motion on number 9. I motion to cancel the December 12th, 2019 RCDC meeting.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good deal. All right, guys, do we need to actually make motions to adjourn, or can we just adjourn a meeting? Just adjourn a meeting.
If everybody gets up and leaves,
It's an adjourn.
it's all approved.
I've always wondered about that, and over the course of God, what, 5 years? Not quite 4 years, I guess.
Motion to adjourn.
We've always motioned to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, but it doesn't necessarily have to have a
So
second.
it's
and a
the
vote.
council goodbye, yeah.
That's right.
Everybody get up and go.
It was.
All right. Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. You guys traveling at all?